FTX and a lot of the cryptocurrencies have crashed and people are looking for who's responsible. In this video, we're going to talk about why I think the people that promoted FTX and these other exchanges should be responsible. And if you're new to the channel and you don't know who I am, my name is Mckensy Long. I've spent the last decade in the financial services industry. I've helped thousands of people become educated about money, whether it's clients or students, and I've helped train thousands of agents. But today we're going to be talking about FTX and the people who promoted it and why they should be held responsible, and maybe even some of the ways that they should be held responsible. Now, if you didn't see my last video, this one is in contrast to that, where I was talking about why I feel that they should not be held responsible for promoting these things, whether it was because a lot of them were commercials or whatever it might be. So I ask you to watch the two different videos and the different mindsets between them, and let me know what you think. I would love to know about in the comments down below how you feel about it. And again, today as we're talking about why they should be held responsible, a brief recap is there's really two different positions or types of people that are being caught up in these lawsuits. One of them is going to be more of the people who did the commercials and they did some kind of promotion, the celebrities, the basketball players, Shaq, Steph Curry, Lindsay Lohan, Jake Paul, these kinds of people, Soulja Boy, who were promoting these things and were paid to promote it. They have a level of responsibility. And the second level of responsibility is going to be people who are financial influencers, the YouTubers, the people who have businesses or talk a lot about businesses. Now, Kevin O'Leary is actually in the first category, but I'm not entirely sure why, because I think he would be seen more as a business person. So it'll be interesting to see kind of how that goes. But for the YouTubers, they're looking at even a little bit further because they were giving financial advice and they are seen as financial professionals, or people take their advice, they have influence. So the question is, are they looked at differently than a celebrity who promotes something, and should they be held accountable on a different level than, let's say, Tom Brady, who plays football and isn't known for necessarily great financial advice? Do you look at him differently than you would maybe a Graham Stephan, who has a YouTube channel about financial advice? And really, before we get into it, I do want to make sure it's blatantly clear that I think that the people who have stolen money and who have done wrong to people should definitely be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law. So we're not talking about the people who were doing things behind the scenes that were illegal. We're kind of putting that off to the side, so hopefully you can do that with me. And we're talking about mostly the people who were promoting it and using their influence to draw them into cryptocurrencies like FTX, or a lot of the people who have already been fined for TRX and BTT. So a lot of the list, you're probably going to know some of these names: Lindsay Lohan, Jake Paul, Soulja Boy, Akon, Neo, Austin Malone, Little Yacht, and I think there was even a porn star or something that was in there. So now obviously these people are not necessarily taken as seriously when it comes to money, but these people actually just recently got fined $400,000 each to pay back for their sponsorships. Now, the reason why they got fined, I think, is a little bit silly to me. It's basically simply because they didn't announce that they were being paid to promote these different currencies or these different platforms to buy cryptocurrencies. So their fault in the matter is that they didn't say that they were being paid. And I think we're going to see the same or a similar outcome for those celebrities who had promoted FTX as well. But where this really gets interesting, for me at least, is when it comes to the financial gurus, the financial professionals, and the YouTubers. And obviously they're in the same space. So they're on YouTube acting as or promoting things as a financial professional. Graham Stephan, for example, is a real estate agent, so he's not necessarily seen as a financial professional. However, he and some of the others have a lot of influence over people, and they talk about a lot of financial stuff. I do want to note here, coming from being a financial professional and getting into YouTube, there was a lot of pressure to talk about cryptocurrency. Both from the financial professional side, I lost friends, I lost clients because I didn't really want to get into that space. It was something that I thought was very volatile, and I work more in the area of what people need to do financially to get on track. And the vast majority of Americans don't have a ton of disposable income to even meet the requirements that they have to help send their kids to school and get on track for retirement and have an emergency fund and prepare for the future, let alone to have a bunch of discretionary income to put it into something like a cryptocurrency. So that's just kind of the space where I'm at. Even though a lot of these guys are putting away tons of money, the goals that they have, they're barely meeting or able to meet those requirements, not necessarily having a ton of extra. So for me and my clients, I didn't feel like there was a lot of need for it. Now, maybe that'll change in the future, but maybe also because of where we were at, that kind of saved me from getting into this space. And I also didn't have FTX messaging me saying that they were going to pay me $100,000 a month either. So maybe that would have changed something, but probably not, simply because I don't want to advise on something that I don't really believe in. But the reason why I'm bringing this up is because there were a lot of emotions around these things. And as a YouTuber, you could also see the channels who were promoting these things took off dramatically. The attention turned to those people who are willing to talk about these different exchanges and cryptocurrencies and promote these things. So there was also a huge desire and lots of monetary, desire also there to talk about some of these things, even if somebody maybe wasn't an expert about it, but they had some influence. And to some of the people who had left me and gone into cryptocurrency, I'm pretty sure that they've lost a ton of money. And so if they happen to be watching, I want you to know that you can come back. I don't have any hard feelings about it. I would love to still be able to help you reach a lot of your goals if that's something that you want to do. So you may have feelings about it, but I don't. And this isn't the first time that I've seen something like that happen. I've been around long enough. I've seen lots of trends come and go, and this happens over and over again. I can't tell you how many times, either through myself or people that I work with, that people have pulled out a whole bunch of money to jump into some kind of fad, and they have lost almost everything that they have. So this is not unique necessarily to crypto or the exchanges. And anyway, I got off topic, but I did want to have that message in there to talk about this is something that happens quite frequently, and people do lose a lot of money chasing these types of fads. Whether it was weed here in Nevada, when that became legal, there were lots of people who chased those things. There's hot stocks that people are chasing. It happens way more than it probably should. The challenge is we're trying to find fault with these particular YouTubers for promoting this, when I've never seen a lot of these other people get in trouble for a lot of the things that they've done and the schemes that people have fallen into and done. Those people, although they get in trouble, a lot of the times the people that promoted those things don't necessarily get in trouble. So I think we are in unique territory. But outside of my personal experience and the drive of wanting to talk about these things, both from a financial professional and from a YouTuber, there's a huge monetary disconnect if you're not willing to talk about these things. If you look even in the difference in subscribers of people who give good financial advice, and there's a lot of them on YouTube, the amount of followers they have versus the people who are getting wrapped up in a lot of these things is dramatic. So part of it is that enticement that if you want followers, you've kind of got to jump on fads and almost give bad advice, which I still wouldn't recommend doing, but I can see why people are drawn to it. But getting back to what the SEC has to say about this is that there's kind of two different definitions or two different regulations that they're looking at. Number one is, did they disclose that they were being paid to promote these securities? And did they say how much that they were actually being paid to promote them? And those are two different things, but inside of the same category. And that's where they're getting a lot of people in trouble with. I have noticed that they're only sticking really to fines. They're not getting into any penalties outside of that, which is kind of interesting. But where this becomes a challenge for me is the whole idea of crypto was that it was outside of the regulation space, so people could do whatever they wanted with it, but now we're bringing in regulations to control how people talk about it. So that's kind of interesting to me. It was this gray area of, is it even a security? Is there regulation on it? And now we're saying that there is, even though it's this gray area that was undefined. So people were promoting it in this gray area. And now we're kind of going back in time and saying it was a security this whole time. And now we're fining them. But they obviously caused people a lot of harm. So there is some responsibility in that. The second one where it becomes even more interesting is, did the FTX YouTubers, outside of not disclosing that they were being paid and outside of not disclosing how much they were being paid? So the second part of it is going to be, did the FTX promoters on YouTube, did they mislead anybody? Did they omit or did they lie about the safety of FTX? And I think a lot of them did, probably in a sense that maybe they were talking about the exchange. There were a lot of times where Graham Stephan and some of these other guys, and I've seen it on a lot of the channels, where they talked about they're having people say that it was safe and secure. And maybe what they meant by safe and secure was the exchange, which obviously we found out was false, but they weren't necessarily talking about the investment inside of the exchange being safe and secure, because I think everybody knew that cryptocurrency was speculative. But if they didn't disclose that, there's another level of them being responsible for what they've said and what they've done. And I think a lot of them did that, or they made the illusion of, or they made people feel like it was safe and secure. Now, obviously they couldn't control what Sam was doing behind the scenes, but if they promoted it as safe and secure and they didn't specify that they weren't talking about the actual investment inside of it, there's some gray area there that they will probably be found some kind of fault with. And ultimately, I think what's going to happen for YouTubers and for people who promote things, and this is probably going to be good in the long run, is that we need to be much more careful on how we promote things to people when we have influence and when we have an audience. And I think that part of the challenge goes to Time Magazine. A lot of these guys promoted Sam and they promoted FTX and they promoted a lot of this stuff, yet they're not being held responsible for anything, but the YouTubers are. And the YouTubers, I think, unfortunately, at least hearing from what they were saying, is they looked at the large companies, they looked at Time Magazine as a source of credible information. They looked at what BlackRock was doing and investing in some of these things as credible information, and these people doing their due diligence, that they thought because they had all this recognition from these major companies, that those guys were doing due diligence and that they didn't have to. And unfortunately, that's not quite how, well, fortunately, that's not quite how the law works, is that you, as you're recommending something, you still have the burden of doing due diligence. And this is a huge reason, I think part of what causes all of this is that there are great people with great financial advice who are great financial professionals that refuse or are unable to or unwilling to get on YouTube and risk their license, especially if they've built up a great book of business. It doesn't really make sense for them to come onto YouTube or come onto social media and give great advice simply because of the ability of them saying one thing wrong and it being on YouTube, and then it opening up this whole issue where they lose their license and their livelihood. So it leaves this open space for people who are not financial professionals to step into and give all kinds of crazy advice. Now, I'm not saying that that's right or wrong, but that's what I've seen from my perspective, and it's happened with me personally. There are some licenses that I don't hold anymore simply because I wanted to get into the YouTube space, and knowing one wrong step could eventually lead to you losing your license. But when you lose a license in that manner, you lose everything that you've built. And not wanting to risk that, I've had to navigate which licenses to keep and what advice to be able to give so that I can make sure that I'm giving proper advice to people. But I think it's important enough that we need to educate people on how money works, that it's worth part of that risk, or it's worth some of the loss of income, simply because people need to understand it. And this is a great space to be able to reach people that they can still get good information. The challenge is the basics are not exciting. to spend less than you make, to build up an emergency fund, have some proper protection, start putting money away long term to be able to be ready for retirement, and to make sure you have some of the areas taken care of in case you need long-term care or critical illness. And the basics of financial literacy are fairly boring, and people are way more excited to talk about things that are very speculative because they saw somebody on YouTube made $3 million because of some crazy coin that they purchased. But understanding that that's not reality doesn't mean that we shouldn't still be giving some advice, that we shouldn't still be putting good information out there. And I think, unfortunately, that's what's been happening. So I think these people should be held responsible for what they're saying and what they're doing. But I also kind of feel for them that it wasn't disclosed that these were securities, and now the SEC is basically coming in saying that they are. Now, from a financial professional standpoint, we knew that they were, but it was this gray area. So unfortunately, in gray area, things happen, not always good things. And then we also want to punish those people for operating in the gray area. And I don't really think that that's fair. So anyway, that's a lot of what's going on. And I do think these people need to be held accountable, not just because I have anything against them. I'm not out here to kind of kick them while they're down, because I see that's a lot of what the media does. Time magazine, right? It promotes them on the way up and then it kicks them on the way down, and they're just as responsible, I think, for promoting these things as anybody else is. But I do think that we need to protect people, and we need to find a way to make sure that we're giving good advice. And I think people are responsible for what they say, and they're responsible for what they promote. And unfortunately, we've got to figure out how to do that in this gray area. So anyway, I hope this was helpful for you. Don't forget to smash the like button and hit the subscribe and the bell as well. We've got a ton of financial literacy concepts that we do and that we educate about. And if you want to really understand how money works, there's some links down below where you can get a one-on-one call with me. You can get a financial book to help you start learning some of these things. And I think that when people actually understand how money works and they understand the concepts, and this is a very simple book, How Money Works, Stop Being a Sucker. I understand that. But when you start to understand these basics, when you see things happening that are fads, you become stronger in your will to stay dedicated to what it is you're doing, instead of in desperation of having no financial literacy, trying to jump on trends because of the fear of loss and the fear of missing out. That when people are financially educated, they do better with money. They do better with understanding and not falling for a lot of these things. So that's why I recommend it. That's why I have this YouTube channel. And whether or not the subscribers are crazy big or crazy small, I feel that if I can make that impact for somebody and hopefully maybe help them avoid something or help them understand money better, that they can set themselves on the right track, I think that that's worth it. And if you agree with me, hitting the subscribe button would be valuable. I appreciate you. And you're going to get a lot more content that I think is going to actually be usable and help you make your life better, and especially doing better financially. And as always, I hope you have a great day, and I'll catch you later. Bye.